like just to remind that, I would say, hopefully, Paris is the first letting market, or I would say the biggest office market all over Europe, since it is 53 million square meters, which is to be divided between, let's say, Paris Intramuros, which is around 16 million square meters, and also, for instance, also La Défense, which is 3.3 million square meters. So a major part of the European letting market in offices, obviously. Very quickly, I would like to say where actually investors are normally, let's say, putting their money. Well, you see this, let's say, pink or red ball. It's said to be this Paris Intramuros CBD. It's where historically everybody is investing. And when you are more on the western part, when you have this blue and pink ball, which is just above a town called Puteaux, it is where we have the La Défense area. So these are the core and, let's say, historic area for investing. After you have the, let's say, north part, where it is more former industrial area, where you have this sort of blue stars, where actually this is a new development where some investors are now investing for more, let's say, added value investment opportunity. And you have the south inner rim, where you have this sort of triangle, both green and blue, where it's a mixture of former both industrial but also recognized business district location. So this is just to give a general overview where the market is playing around. Now, before we talk about investment, just some figures regarding the take-up. Like you've seen last year, 2014, the total take-up in offices reached the figure of 2.2 million square meters, which was already a major increase compared to the year before. It was something like 16% additional compared to 2013. So let's say that all the players were pretty happy. And you see the first quarter 2015, where it is actually 372,000 square meters, which is pretty, there is a real slowdown of the take-up this first quarter. For two reasons. First, because last quarter was pretty high, and also because, let's say, we understand that number of tenants are either regearing or renegotiating their leases, or decision process are pretty long, or some major transaction above 5,000 square meters didn't happen. So we need to have some confirmation of these slow figures of first quarter. Let's say we cannot make any decision with only one quarter, but there is something which is true, is that despite there is a sort of overall healthy or recovery sentiment on the French economy, we don't see any, let's say, practical or pragmatic result from, let's say, occupancy point of view for this first quarter. Now, if you look at the stock, the immediate stock availability, like you can see here, 6-7 years ago, we had a major increase. It's now more or less of 4 million, but now since 3 years, the stock is stabilizing, which is actually important to notify and to put it emphasis on. It is a little 21%, which is representing the new and redeveloped ratio of this stock. Which means what? Which means that we normally analyze that when the stock, the renew or the brand new stock is between 15 and 17%, we start to create shortness for the supply, which means that obviously the rental level could increase. Here there is not another supply, there is not too much stock, but we are not in a position to make so that there is not enough supply so that the rental income increase. So this is a figure we must bear in mind. So 4 million square meters, but 20 million brand new ratio. Another one which is important regarding the stock is obviously the vacancy rate. Vacancy rate is around 7.2%. We consider that at 7.2%, the liquidity of the letting market in Paris is good. However, even if in the average of Paris is around 5.25. We are of the opinion there is still some areas, I would say on the western part and north part of Paris, where there is, it is sure, a too high vacancy rate, which is actually due to two things. First, either because there is some very old buildings, so an obsolescence. And the second reason is because from time to time some of this vacancy rate is also due to investment which were done 7 to 8, 10 years ago when the land was bought, so land bought at too much high price. So now rental levels are still slightly too high. So from a general point of view, we feel comfortable with this vacancy rate since it has stabilized and because we are convinced that there is no over construction, no over production. In terms of rental level, we are of the opinion that the rental level now is stabilizing. The major decrease of rental level in Paris market is behind us. Obviously, it has decreased a lot since 2012. Now, obviously, what it is interesting is to link it with the TI and the incentive which are given to the tenant. And these are the headline rents. So the headline rents are stabilized, and now we are analyzing that the incentive, the rent-free period, are also stabilizing. Just to give you some figures, when you have a building which is well located, let's say prime location within Paris intramuros, the incentive represents between 12 to 15% of this headline rents. However, when you are more located north part or secondary location of Paris suburb, you therefore have more, let's say, between 25 and 35% incentive vis-à-vis these headline rents. But we really now analyze the fact that, okay, economy is still hardening, it is still hard. However, we are of the opinion that rental level now are stabilizing. So this was a very quick overhaul regarding the letting market. Now we will come back on the retail and logistic element later, but now some figures on the investment market, which, like you can see here 2014, the French market had an increase by some 40%. 40%, which is, it was 16.5 billion euro invested here 2013, and it was 24 billion invested 2014. 40%, just to put it in perspective with some other pan-European markets, the European market on the investment side has increased also by, from an overall point of view, by 40%. So French increase is the same as the general average at a pan-European level. This is the first thing we must bear in mind. The second thing is that you see that the first quarter of each year, which is a green one, is increasing bit by bit, regularly, but surely. So we had an increase by 10%, 4.3 billion euro invested this first quarter, to be compared to 4 billion invested last year. I must admit that if last year the general increase of France was the same as the general increase at European level, here France is slightly late compared, for instance, for UK, your market, which has increased tremendously this first quarter, is late compared to some of the markets like Madrid or like also Italy, which is also recovering. However, it's much better compared to, for instance, Netherlands or Germany. Now, how could we explain this increase of first quarter and compare it to last figures of last year? There is something which is very important, is how this increase of 10% by 10%, how this 4.3 million were, let's say, realized in the market. Last year, you see on the chart on the left, you had, regarding the deals of more than 200 million, you had 2 deals. This year, you have 8 deals. So the market is much better well balanced, because these 2 deals of last year were obviously including the major deal in La Défense. You've some of you know pretty well, and some of you have heard, which is the Cœur Défense Tower, which has been bought by Lone Star, which was 1.3 billion. So with Lone Star deal, actually you have half of the total market done at Paris level last year, whereas this year the market, we had 8 deals, for instance. You had Oxford, who bought a 220 million euro investment in the Les Bank. You had Allianz, who bought a shopping center. You had Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, who bought a 475 million euro northern suburb of Paris. You had Malaysian through Invesco, who bought 240 million euro in Boulogne, just the Golden Crescent, and so on and so on. So, compared to last year, we feel even more comfortable regarding how this market has been realized this first quarter. And if we had some additional analysis regarding the deal between 50 and 200 million euro, when you aggregate the number of deals and more or less the total volume, we also feel comfortable in terms of how homogeneous this deal were. However, two warnings. First is that number of these deals were deals which were started last year before summer. So they were, I would call it, they could have been realized end of last year. So there was no really new transaction. And the second thing is that the segmentation of the market, which is below 50 million, which is linked with some important part of the market with, for instance, the French CPI, has decreased by number of deals and volume by 50%. So there is another shift of the market towards big volume, big deal, which is good and which is bad, but we will talk about it later with the panelists. The other things we need to keep in mind, 2 or 3 analyses of these figures, like the region, for instance. You can see the region last year were representing a quarter, and this first quarter only 15%. Just bear in mind, regarding offices, nothing happened this first quarter. It was done thanks to one transaction. I'm sure you heard about Allianz, who bought to Unibail Rodamco a shopping center called Nice Étoile for slightly less than 400 million euro. So obviously, out of 4.3 billion, it makes a huge ratio for region, but it is not that good market today, but we anticipate it's going to be much better for the coming quarters, obviously. The other thing which is good is that we have still Paris, which is between 35 and 40% of the investment, which is plain. It is always where obviously the equity wants to secure its investment. It is thanks to the left bank investment, and obviously, and this is not an habit, but Western Crescent is almost 40%. But 40% it's only the result of several deals which happen in this area. But there is no specific reason to say, well, the Western Crescent is representing almost 50% of the investment. It's just a result of, let's say, some deal which was in pipe. So what we must bear in mind is that when we see this investment ratio for first quarter, the equity is still looking or still focusing on, let's say, secure location. Another one which is interesting is obviously where the money is going in terms of segmentation between retail, logistic, and offices. Retail is at 20% thanks to this deal with Unibail and Allianz. I'm afraid to say that logistic was pretty poor this first quarter. Not because there is no interest, and dear François, you will have to talk about this, but there is no deal in France for this first quarter, only for question of supply. I mean, your last deal, you went into press 5.5 billion, will change obviously these statistics, but nothing so that we will have to frighten regarding logistics. It's only a question of supply. Now, just to talk quickly about retail, we will talk about it later, obviously, but I just wanted to remind, before talking about the investment volume in retail, but to remind some rental level. I mean, nothing you don't know, but obviously, like everywhere, prime, which means what? You see there is an increase by more than, from time to time, 100 and 200% when you are prime located. Champs-Élysées now is 20,000 euro per square meter for a weighted area, and Montaigne, for instance, is 16,000 euro per square meters for weighted area. So prime is very looked after, obviously, also in France. Secondary location for retail, obviously, nobody is looking at it. Like everywhere, pan-European level, in order to securize the turnover. What is interesting here in terms of investment volume is, obviously, you see this huge increase here 2014 in retail, since it has been multiplied by 2. It was almost 7 billion euro. However, we must put emphasis on one analysis, which is, I'm sure you've heard or you remember transaction made, for instance, between Klépierre and Carrefour, the Carmelia deal, or some others between Wereldav and Mendibai and some others. So there is 3 billion and a half of transaction which we anticipate were very due to specific portfolio. We are more of the opinion that the market, French market, in terms of retail, should be around 4 billion rather than for 6.5 or 7 billion. So we do not anticipate for 2015 this level of investment. The second point, which is important to, let's say, highlight, is that the orange brown one is actually the foreign, is a French investment, but the green one is a foreign equity, which makes me a bit smiling, because I very often hear that, well, France, nobody wants to go and so on, but there is some foreign equity, which is, let's say, believing actually in the, let's say, power of consumption of the French economy, since there is, let's say, each year more or less between a quarter or a third of the money which is coming from foreign investors. This was a quick, let's say, reminder regarding the retail element. Now a quick reminder regarding logistics. We'll talk about it later. Where actually two things we must bear in mind. First, it is obviously this sort what we call in our French expression, which is the north or southern corridor, which is along the motorway, major motorway, or let's call it backbound, where it is where the market, both from a tenancy point of view and also from an investment point of view, is happening. It represents between 70 and 80% of the take-up. You look at the take-up, which is quite well performing, and the first quarter, despite from an investment point of view, the results were pretty poor for first quarter 2015. However, there is a general trend which is pretty good, since the take-up has increased by, let's say, more or less 40%. So we feel comfortable on the logistic side also. There is one thing which we will discuss it later, but you see the headline rents were pretty, let's say, low compared to some German or UK rents in terms of logistics. In terms of volume, we were mentioning earlier that the volume were pretty low this quarter. Okay, it's only for practical reason. However, you see, the same as for retail, there is a general increase since now 2009. Now, one thing, having said this, one thing which is very important is everybody is talking about core plus, secondary, and so on and so on. Why 2014 we've seen so little value-added, opportunistic pro rata in terms of investment? It's not because there is no interest on behalf of equity on the French market. It's only for two reasons. The one is shortness of supply, obviously, like everywhere, but also it's in France and in the region in terms of added value investment opportunity, and also because we must admit that, how could I say it, after 2009, in United States or in UK or somewhere else, let's say that the market, the new pricing, the repricing has occurred. In France, like in Germany, I would say that the repricing didn't occur sufficiently. Let's assume that it has decreased by 10 to 15%, but not more. Right? In some other country like Spain or UK, let's say it has decreased by between 20 or 30, 35%. So it means what? It means that from time to time, you have some, let's say, investment opportunity which will be analyzed like being added value, potential added value, potentially opportunistic because of the location, because some other issue or whatever. But from a book value point of view, they are still at a very high price, which means what? Which means they are not sellable at the current time. But I really want to put emphasis on the fact that this ratio of value added both 2014 and first quarter 2015 are not in line with the pressure of the market for buying this sort of investment opportunity. Now, an important point we'll talk about later, but I would just like to put emphasis on two main things, that French ratio is decreasing, even if the French equity is there for buying. And who is increasing? Obviously, North American investors, but more through the value-added investment market. And obviously, since now 18 months, 24 months, Middle East investor, huge amount of money, but really now it has happened in the London market since now 2 years, but that's it. The Asian money is now there, not only there for making offers and for studying the market, for educational purpose or whatever, but for buying. So this is very, very important to notice this, and we anticipate that the Asian will be much higher within 9 months by the end of this year. One of the last things I wanted to highlight, this is the same for everywhere at European level, but our risk premium, I would say, the spread is around 325% basis point when you talk about a prime market in Paris, Intramuros, in the CBD, since now, let's say that the yield in Paris, Intramuros, for prime are between 3.5 and 4.5. You want to be in La Défense now, you're more between 5 and 6.5, always for prime. And when you want to be in the inner rim for offices, you are between 5 and 6%. So inner ring, you have to decrease the yield compression by 150 basis points since this last 18 months. When you are inside Paris, Intramuros, in the CBD, you have yield compression between 30 and 50 basis points. And in logistics, we will talk about it later, you have a yield compression since now 2 years, which is around 150 basis points for prime. In retail, we experience now some transaction. Blackstone just bought end of last year less than 3%, and we have some deal in hand with around 3 and 3.25. So there is a major yield compression is obviously in retail, as far as like everywhere it is located obviously in prime location. Last things now, some investment volume in the region. You have in mind that the total investment volume for France is something like last year was around 24 billion euro. Now, please bear in mind that regarding the investment market in the region, the office will represent, if we take, it will be the same if we take some two other towns, but it's more or less 1.2, 1.3 billion euro invested, just to give you some ratio. Lyon, the blue one, represent more or less 650. The gray one, which is Lille, is more or less 150 million. The one which is Marseille, the green one, is more or less 300 million. So you see, it goes from, let's say, 100 million for Bordeaux to 600 million for Lyon. These are more or less the major ratio for the region. And last figures we should have in mind for the region is okay from an investment point of view, but what about the take-up? But the take-up is in blue. You have Lyon. Average take-up is more or less 250,000 square meters a year in offices. The one which is grey, Lille, is more or less 150. Toulouse is more or less 200, and Marseille is more or less between 80,000 and 120,000 square meters. So there is a good depthness of the market in the region, but the elasticity of the region is pretty poor, since you see the total take-up is, let's say, more or less regular, bearing in mind that it is 1.1, more or less the total take-up is 1.1 million square meters each year, to be matched with a total stock of 1.8 million square meters. These are the main figures. You will have to bear in mind vis-à-vis the future discussion we will have regarding also the region. And last thing, which are the list, but what about the yield? Obviously, there is also a huge yield compression, since now, for instance, in Lille, Lyon, Marseille, you are between 5.5 and 3/4 net initial yield. These are the prime yield for offices. And to be above 6% net initial yield, now you need to be in some town like Bordeaux. But John, you were telling me that we were talking of, I'm sure you've seen the fast train in Japan, which was 600 kilometers speed yesterday. Bordeaux, Paris will be 2 hours TGV by the end of this summer. So we will have it, will put an increase on yield compression and interest on behalf of some companies, obviously. Okay, so this was a very, very quick summarize with, like I said, challenge in 15 minutes how to summarize the whole market. But if I had to give a quick, it's an even quicker synthesis, the equity is there for buying. There is a real sentiment regarding the economy that the exit of the black tunnel is there. Now, the only thing we are expecting is to have some evidence that investment is there, leaving the political side.